A soybean rally and yet the progress of the U.S. harvest. Jerry Giddell is ready to assess all of that and more right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have had a Friday ending up with a rally for soybeans and a negative for both corn and wheat. But first, let's talk about the numbers that you are receiving from the Pro Farmer Tour that indicate several things about the U.S. harvest. Uh, what are you hearing?
Well, to some extent, I think what we saw in central Illinois played out, maybe not specifically in the Illinois number. It was a record at 203 bushels, or actually 204 total, I guess. From there, that's up, pretty significantly from the previous level. But at the same time, the USDA's projections up at 225 million, 225 bushels, I should say, up 9 or 10 bushels over the 2 years ago. So now we're at 204. Doesn't really look like it's going to end up likely being the case from there. Now, the one thing about this is kind of we're talking about some of the numbers at the end of the tour. Uh, Things that happened along the way here in the Western Corn Belt. We had that big rain up there in northwest Iowa, southern Minnesota, and on into southeast South Dakota, which is really the really big producing area of that state. The yields were just a little bit snug, or this they were similar last year, but last year was a tough year. And then you turn around and look at the reality that what happens here is that since we don't go to, the Pro Farmer doesn't go to every county in South Dakota or Nebraska or Iowa. They end up hitting the high ones, and then they make adjustments over time over past traditions in that. So, like in just an example here, South Dakota, they usually take 5.3 bushels off their total. Well, that's if you stay in the last year's total is 155 and it's 156 this year, you're not up to 150 is what the regional suggestion of what you're seeing from the yields we had in southeast South Dakota, and now the USDA is at 162, and that was the first kind of indications here that issues in this report or in this tour was going to actually get past the fence post and get in the field like we did in central Illinois. And same thing in Nebraska. They had their yields were 174. They came in with adjustment that could up to nearly 187, 188, but the USDA is at 194. So here we are again. Now, to some extent, there's other issues that go on here in that, but that's just an indication of some of the scenarios here that makes the USDA's 183 bushel level not look as strong. Now, if you start looking at the other side of things, as you said, Ohio was kind of about what the USDA's projections were at 188 with their adjustments. Indiana, though, Indiana was a area that was projecting, 207, and they had 187, but then they traditionally are about 4 bushels short. So that gets you 191. Well, 191 and 207 is pretty dramatically different. Same thing with Illinois. They had a 225, and now we have a 208 versus the 204 that they found from the tour. So, and then ultimately even Iowa their adjustments there. Overall they had a 193 from the Pro Farmer Tour, and 6 bushel or 7 bushel adjustment put us up there just close to 200, and then the USDA is at 209. Now, I don't want to get into, these are great indications, this kind of stuff. The one thing about the USDA's numbers were based upon only the satellite situation, looking at the crop, how green it was, what's happened, and also the producer numbers. There was no particular enumerators, which are the USDA people that go into about, I want to say somewhere between 8 and 10,000 fields across the whole Midwest, and that type of thing. Set up these sites. People go out and look at them, make the measurements, do all the good things. There was none of that in this number. So the USDA did not have that kind of backing, which the Pro Farmers did somewhat the same thing, but definitely not as extensive as what the USDA does. So there you go. The numbers, at least, kind of told us going into this afternoon's update from Pro Farmer that they were not going to project their U.S. Corn yield at the 183 bushel level. They decided to go down to 181, kind of where the USDA was in their projections all spring. Now, we still have a little bit of weather and things like that to impact it, so that's probably not where we're going to finally end up, and there's going to be adjustments accordingly. But along the way, I think that there is at least a little bit more understanding here that the total bushels here that's available to us here, if we're talking about, we adjusted our planted numbers down 700,000 here earlier in the month, and then also now we have a 2 bushel difference. So all of a sudden here, we're probably dealing with a 108, 60, 165, 170 less total production. That doesn't mean we've got any shortages on U.S. corn, but at least from the standpoint of carryover stocks for the coming years, it's a little bit closer back towards the 1.1 to 1.3 million carryover stock we've been carrying for the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, in the markets, along with those numbers, they have priced in maybe the Federal Reserve talks today. So, but why do you think there was this gap between what the rally with soybeans and corn and wheat going down?
Well, the soybeans, I think they were really kind of looking at what's happened this whole week here. You go back every day, we had soybean purchases. We had some unknown purchases. We had, actually Mexico bought some corn too, but it was really concentrated on beans and that. And the Chinese have been very modest purchases of new crop soybeans. So I think that we had a very good export total, by the way, yesterday on new crop on beans. I think we're going to have another one next week. I think there was a realization that once you got down to $10 and below, it was pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking, from there. And the fact that most likely the U.S. producers are not likely to be a seller of soybeans dramatically here out of the Bend. I think they will probably look at some kind of concerns building out of South America, either from La Nina, less production being put out there. There's lots of different commentary about the low prices from South America that could also influence us here on our prices for the 2024-25 crop year. But yeah, definitely kind of a mixed bag here, because the USDA's numbers that came through. And the interesting thing about it is even the the numbers that we got from the crop tour today, and you say, golly, they're not telling me yields, they're just telling me pod numbers. Well, boy, in August each year, it is very difficult to uh, take enough bean plants to actually put together a sample and then determine what that's going to be across the field. It's a start. It's an idea. The interesting thing about it is that Illinois and Indiana had at or near record yields. I think both of them had record yield, record pod counts. Let's get that straight. I'm even bad about that myself. They're 1419 and 1409 numbers, and then Iowa was pretty solid. Well, those are some three big bean producing states, so they're going to influence that number. And what happens? The soybean number goes up 1.8 bushels from the on the Pro Farmer Tour up to 53.1 versus excuse me, it went up to 54.9 from 53.1. That's a 1.8 bushel increase. And boy, it doesn't mean that USDA is going to go that high, but they're probably not going to go down on their September number. And to some extent, when you go back and look at the past histories of what happens with the September yields versus the end of the year, many times when their optimism is so high, weather comes through in August or something else happens. And the one thing about it is, unfortunately, even if you're got the most powerful satellite in the world, you can look at things green from the top of the world, and you can't really see in how many pods are there and what size they are, and that is a huge difference. Even this 1409 to 1420 estimates. If we don't get a lot of rain, and we haven't had a lot of rain during the month of August, the keepsake in the beans and even in corn is the fact that we've had cool temperature, normal to below. We have not had, we're going to finally get our 90s in here this coming weekend and into the last weekend of the year, our last weekend of August, I should say. And that's a big, big difference. Last year we were cooking lots of the time during August. We even continued it strong above normal. Now, above normal in September is not 95 degrees. It's 85 degrees, 88. And so just because we cool off here from the 90s, maybe next week, if it doesn't go back into the 70s and low 80s like it has been the last 10 days here in Chicago, it's really not below normal. So those are the subtleties of what happens in these, what impacts soybeans and all crop yields in the fall.
Yes, so going forward, I think one major factor that we have not weighed in previous episodes is the currency situation in Brazil that would favor the purchases by China.
Yes. Yeah, they've started what, 6, 8 weeks ago that they suddenly let their currency devalue, and that the interesting twist is that I, I it's a come see, come saw scenario in my mind about the reports from our Federal Reserve Chairman talking about the fact that he was really, I've never seen somebody telescope as that they're going to drop interest rates 6 weeks before they can, or at least 4 weeks, like he did today. So stock market rallied in the U.S. That's positive for the stock market. But will that mean the dollar is going to be stronger? Or is that the fact that people have got to, they're going to go somewhere else for higher interest rate? I'm not sure anybody's got a higher interest rate than we do, though. So that's another twist on this thing. But yes, Brazil's going to be competitive. But I think, and that's kind of interesting in the fact that how much we need to find some reason to get the general price of beans higher along, and then we start to see people interested in making purchases and that around the world again. at this point. And if La Nina really starts to crank up, as it seems to be likely the case, in that's definitely going to put a lot of pressure on South American prospects down there. And so if the currency is a little weaker, that probably is going to help Brazil from there.
And what are you expecting for next week?
Well, we've kind of already kind of discussed it. We're going to probably see beans have at least some initial pressure. I just don't know how much more they're going to see here as we press November beans into below 950. From there, the corn side of things, I suspect that this recent values here in the 360s to 370s, maybe I think it's 380s on new crop, and that probably will hold together here going forward. Now that we're going to continue to watch U.S. weather situations, of course. And one interesting thing that's popped up, and it maybe highlighted a little bit last week when some of the producers down there in Argentina were talking about dramatically pulling back their seedings for the 2025 corn plantings because of the leafhopper issues and also low prices. And maybe La Nina have an impact, which it does have a bigger impact on corn. They were talking about 2 million 2 million hectares. I want to see metric tons. 2 million hectares down. Now, some government entity down there projected a number down 1.7 million hectares. So it's basically 17 to 18% down on production, which is interesting. From there, that's quite a dramatic change. Will they do that? I don't know. That's sometimes producers, even the U.S., will cry and cry that they won't do certain things, but when it gets down to looking at ground that's not being productive versus doing something with it, they tend to end up planting things. So that's another feature of this we'll look forward to and how it things. But the corn plantings in Argentina are surely right now at least 6 to 8 weeks away. Probably early October is when they might start planting corn in Argentina. They do a 25 to 35%, maybe 40. And then they plant soybeans after a batch of soybeans and after they have their wheat crop, and then they come back with corn way back in late December and January. So it's going to be a long time before we figure out how many planted area in Argentina actually turns about at this point. But those are the general times that corn and soybeans kind of get planted in Argentina.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Yes, well, we'll kind of struggle along here and see if we can get some base going on here and maybe at least get a little short-term rally in this corn because we're not going to have as many uh, bushels out there per acre. I think that at least is maybe getting some common sense back into the corn market.
All right.
Take care, sir.